what happened in the RNC? Mitch McConnell was booed and Tucker Carlson was cheered. It was just really been something to watch in the last 8 years or so, just how much this party has shifted. It is truly Donald Trump's party.
Manu Raju is CNN's indefatigable chief congressional correspondent. He's also the host of Inside Politics on Sundays and just spent the week anchoring and reporting from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Manu Raju, thanks so much for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back in DC. It's been a lively week.
I can imagine. Thanks for taking the time. I can imagine you're probably a little bit on the tired side after covering one of the craziest news cycles that we've had in presidential campaign history. I want to start with your impressions of the crescendo of the convention, which was former President Donald Trump's big speech on Thursday night. What did you think of it? What were your general takeaways from the speech?
It was long.
It was.
It was. I mean, It's the memorable moments. Of course, will be him talking about the assassination attempt. I think that was a very riveting moment. In he discussing how he almost died, and I think the audience was really with him there. And then he devolved into a long, rambling Trump rally speech that may have lost a lot of viewers. I mean, if you're a Republican, you're probably okay because he hit probably the strongest points in his speech early on in the speech. And if you're an average viewer, maybe that's all you were watching is you change the channel and watch something else. So perhaps that's okay. But the idea that this was going to be a different type of Donald Trump, which was kind of the idea that was being pushed by some people around him going in. They'd be more of a unifying message. It really was not. Ultimately, it was an attack. There were lots of attacks against Democrats. It went back to his lot of his old talking points and rhetoric that we often hear. So you're hearing a lot of Republicans say, maybe he should have capped it at 30 minutes rather than 90 minutes, and that would have been a much more effective speech. But at the end of the day, Republicans are still feeling pretty good about where things are headed into November.
Yeah, I want to get into Trump's attempt at a new tone in a second. But first, I read that the speech, the planned remarks were 3,000 words. Trump ended up speaking for 12,000 words. So it was just way longer than it was supposed to be. And you could tell, I saw people reporting in the room that the prompter would stop every so often and Trump would spend the next 10 minutes talking about, Kid Rock's crowd sizes or something like that. In the room, I also saw some reporting that even the Trump diehards at the front started getting a little restless towards the end there. What was the reception like in the room? Was it enthusiastic until he started rambling in sort of the final hour of it, or was the crowd really amped up for this and just wanted to see Trump speak?
Well, the crowd was really amped up, and I should caution at the time of the speech, I was out of the room. I was not watching everything going down. But I can tell you from what my colleagues were saying is that towards the end, people were getting pretty restless. And, that's actually not uncommon in a Trump rally. Oftentimes, those people are there waiting for hours and hours and hours to get in. They get in. Trump is late. And then he goes on for an hour to 90 minutes. And by the end of it, I think people want to go home. They're a little tired. So, it's no matter how much of a fervent supporter for you that you might be, it's hard to listen to anyone drone on and on like that for so long. So, but, I would say that there was so much anticipation in the whole week building up to that speech. And a lot of people were eager to hear him speak, but maybe not for so long.
Yeah, I mean, I just know for us covering it on the East Coast, the timing ended up getting a little brutal when we were inching closer and closer to midnight. I think, speaking for myself, I was wondering when this was going to get wrapped up. Now, what do you think about the tone of the speech? Yes, you noted that all of the reporting leading up to it suggested that at least the Trump campaign was signaling that Trump had ripped up his speech after the assassination attempt, wrote a new one that emphasized unity, that didn't mention the current administration, that was aimed at bringing the country together. Then we had the speech. It seemed like he tried to do that a little bit in the prepared remarks. He talked about bringing the country together. But then the speech devolved into a rally speech, really. He attacked Nancy Pelosi, called her crazy. He accused Democrats of cheating in elections. He spent much of the speech railing against what he called illegal aliens, ravaging our cities with crime. What did you make of the tone of the speech and how it contrasted with what the Trump campaign was trying to signal before the speech happened?
Yeah, they said that they really was not going to focus at all on really Joe Biden. It was going to be about bringing the country together. And as you noted, I mean, there were significant sections of the speech that he just riffed. He brought up, he just said whatever was on the top of his mind, whether it was, calling Nancy Pelosi crazy Nancy may speak pretty well to the Republican base, but maybe not to the Democratic or independent voters who, you're trying to win over here in an election, or suggesting without evidence, as he's done for the last 4 years, that the election was stolen and that the Democrats had cheated in the election and that's why Joe Biden was president. That's one of the things that you hear from Republicans all the time, saying, let's not talk about that. Let's focus on the future. Let's focus on Joe Biden. Let's make this about the why Joe Biden does not deserve to be reelected, not about relitigating something that in the past that led to everything that in the run up to January 6th, and the reason why that so many voters were ready to be done with them in the aftermath of January 6th. Trump just can't help himself. That is the real issue here. Once he starts talking, he continues to talk. He feels the audience in the room. He thinks they want to hear that kind of thing. But that again, that plays really well with his 35%. Does that play as well with another 10-15% that he needs? Democrats came out after just an absolutely brutal past 3 to 4 weeks of this campaign, thinking that that was good for them. They were happy that he devolved the way he did, because I think that helps shift the conversation a little bit back towards Trump, even if they have their own major problems here. But one other thing, though, is that people will consume this um, speech, not necessarily by watching the whole hour and a half speech, but really by the snippets they see on social media. And what are they going to remember? Maybe the assassination attempt, and then Hulk Hogan pulling his
Hulk
shirt
Hogan.
off. So like,
Exactly.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably what they're going to end up remembering. So it may not, all this other stuff may not really even matter that much.
Right. I suspect if you're scrolling on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, you're going to see Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off. You're going to see maybe a snippet from the Trump speech, but you're not going to be subjected to the full 90-minute ramble. It's interesting because
Right.
when it was first reported that Trump was going to try for a new tone and it was love and unity, I thought to myself, because I think that the bar has been set so low for Trump that when he does manage to pause on the more extreme rhetoric for a hot second, the media typically praises him. And I was thinking, like, man, if he is disciplined enough to really run on that for the rest of the campaign, he's going to crush it. I think like Americans and voters would really, really like to see him do that, but he can't help himself. And so I think it was a fantasy that he was ever going to stick to that. Now, he leaned into stolen election conspiracy theories. He suggested that Democrats cheat in elections. Does that concern, you're going to be covering this obviously for the next couple of months. Does that rhetoric concern you, and how do you think about covering it? Because obviously in the last election, those kind of claims were not only a massive challenge for the media. Fox News embraced Trump's election lies and ended up paying a steep cost for it. But it also inspired the January 6th riot at the Capitol. And now I think it's a bigger challenge for the media because it's not just Trump saying these things. You have massively influential people like Elon Musk that are also embracing the stolen election theories. How do you look at covering that?
So I think you have to say what the actual facts are whenever Trump says something like that. It's that the election was not stolen. There were multiple investigations that happened at the state level, federal level, and that didn't show any sort of widespread fraud that caused the election to be stolen or rigged in any way. And even Trump's own Justice Department, led by Bill Barr, reached that conclusion after their own probe that happened right after the 2020 election. So and not to mention, court after court after court rejected any attempt by the Trump team to try to bring that into the legal system. And including led to an effort at the Supreme Court, as everyone remembers, in the aftermath of 2020. So our job as a media is to remind people when those claims are made is that they're not true. So it doesn't. You don't have to be. passionate or angry about it or emotional about it, but just say it factually that there were investigations that happened, there was no widespread fraud, and Trump is saying what he's saying despite having any evidence to back it up. So, and then hopefully viewers and readers can make their own decisions about that after they hear that.
Right. I think that's a good philosophy for how it should be covered. I think far too often it does get too emotional because of, it's a difficult thing to cover a political figure who, in the face of fact checks, just says the same thing again. But Tucker Carlson spoke before Trump, and he had a notable speech, I thought, in that he really fawned over the former president. And that struck me because we know privately, thanks to the Dominion lawsuit, which revealed his private texts. And in those texts, he said that he hates Trump passionately, among other things. So that was an interesting turnabout for Tucker Carlson. But I'm curious, from your reporting and what you saw there, how did that speech go over in the room? From what I saw, Tucker Carlson was received as kind of one of the stars of the RNC.
Yeah, and look, that I think that exemplifies the shift under Trump about where this Republican Party is right now. I mean, remember, not too long ago, it was Mitch McConnell in the Senate basically accusing Tucker Carlson of derailing efforts to try to help Ukraine and been blaming him pointedly for the problems in the U.S. response to to Ukraine and beating back Russia. And what happened to the RNC? Mitch McConnell was booed and Tucker Carlson was cheered. Not just because of Ukraine, but it just shows you the philosophy within the GOP right now and who is being promoted and who is being pushed aside. That old guard Republican Party, the establishment, the people who really represent the Ronald Reagan philosophy of where the United States places in the world, the George W. Bush philosophy that's very much in line with the Mitch McConnell philosophy. Those people are being drummed out of the party, and it is the Trump philosophy, which is more isolationist, which is more protectionist. Critics would say his immigration policy is more nativist, all of which really defines the Trump America First agenda. And that is not in line with a lot of the more, free trading, globalist, neoconservative type people who have dominated the Republican philosophy for the past generation, more than generation or so, 2 generations. So you're just seeing this shift within the GOP. Tucker Carlson being totally emblematic of that shift, as is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and her elevation in the speaking at the RNC as well. So it was just really been something to watch in the last 8 years or so, just how much this party has shifted. It is truly Donald Trump's party.
Yeah, that is definitely the biggest story, I think, of the convention, and it's been a story years in the making. The shift of the Republican Party from, let's call it the party of Reagan, to the party of Trump. Absent from the convention this year was George W. Bush, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, and Hulk Hogan and Amber Rose were headliners. So this is a different Republican Party than we've ever seen before. Did it feel different from other conventions that you've covered in that sense? Like, what was the feeling on the ground about how much the party has changed under Trump?
Yeah, absolutely. I have never seen, honestly, the Republican Party this united under Donald Trump. In my entire time covering him since he became a candidate till now, this party has been divided over him. There's all his rhetoric, his controversy, immigration, Muslim bans, indictments, impeachments, you name it. There have been a lot of members who are very, very uneasy about Trump. The 2016 convention, we all remember Ted Cruz essentially urging people not to vote for Donald Trump, him
Yep.
getting booed out. I was on the convention floor when that happened. That was an incredibly tense scene. His wife, Heidi Cruz, had to be escorted out. Mike Lee was booing Donald Trump. It was a totally different scene. You run up to 2020, the party is in a real difficult spot as we are in COVID. It was a different convention then. while Republican criticism of Trump was much more muted, there was still a lot of unease about him as the party's nominee. And it was very clear people in swing states, swing districts, down ticket candidates were staying away from Trump as much as possible. Shift to 2024. I mean, the down ticket candidates were speaking at the convention. I mean, Wisconsin Senate candidates, Michigan Senate candidates. They were, the New York House Republicans who are from the swingiest of swing districts were in attendance, cheering Trump on, giving interviews and the like. The people who could very well lose in another election cycle, they would have been running away from Trump. They would want nothing at all to do with Donald Trump, to be anywhere near them. They are absolutely tying themselves to Donald Trump. And I asked the Senate GOP campaign chairman, Steve Daines, about this week. I asked him, is it a good philosophy for your candidates in swing states, in purple states, to tie themselves to Trump when he has been convicted of a felon of 34 counts, found liable for sexual abuse, tried to overturn an election, all those controversies? Is it a good idea for them to tie themselves to Donald Trump? The answer Steve Daines gave, was absolutely. And the argument really is that at the end of the day, the base really is going to matter hugely in this election. It does not help to be crosswise with your party's nominee, especially if it's Donald Trump who goes after you. And ultimately, it's the Democrats who are in complete disarray, and they're showing the division within the Democratic Party right now is something that Republicans are reveling in. So if they show some unity, perhaps that helps them by a few points in the polls, while Democrats are at war with each other and running away from each other. That creates a different narrative, and it hurts them ultimately in November. So such a shift, really, that we have seen over the past month and really over the past several election cycles.
Yeah, I think you just perfectly explained how we went from January 2021, when the leaders of the Republican Party said Trump is done, we are never going back to that, to now. And it's funny because we saw a unified Republican Party over the course of the RNC, but it's because they purged all the dissenters of Trump and Trumpism from the party, and they're just not at the RNC. There was the only little bit of conflict that we saw was between Kevin McCarthy and Matt Gaetz, two Republicans who have become bitter enemies and had a little verbal tussle on the floor of the convention. You had a great interview with McCarthy afterwards. I like that McCarthy does not care anymore about holding his tongue. So tell us what he said about Matt Gaetz and about their little rivalry that they have brewing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a rivalry; it's a bitter personal
It's searing hatred. It is searing hatred.
Exactly. I mean, this all, of course, stems back to the fact that Kevin McCarthy became the first speaker ever ousted by vote on the House floor. That happened last fall, of course. Matt Gaetz led the charge. Only one member could initiate a vote. Matt Gaetz initiated that vote. 8 Republicans ultimately voted with the Democrats to kick out McCarthy. That led to disarray and the like. So McCarthy flatly blames Matt Gaetz for all of this. Now, the whole thing that McCarthy has been saying, and he reiterated to me, was that Gaetz had came after him simply because of the House Ethics Committee probe looking into allegations of sexual misconduct involving the Florida congressman, as well as having sex with underage girls. This is something that had been investigated by the Justice Department. They declined to pursue charges. There have been some other Gaetz allies who have been ensnared in all of this, but there is a House Ethics Committee investigation that is still ongoing on this matter, which is very serious for Gaetz. Gaetz has denied all of this. Now, the subtext too to this is that McCarthy is trying to defeat Gaetz in his primary right now. He is maneuvering behind the scenes to try to prop up Gaetz's primary challenge, which is later this summer. So there is so much back and forth and personal history involving these two men. And when Caitlin Collins, my colleague, was interviewing Kevin McCarthy, that is when Matt Gaetz came in and started taunting him in the middle of that interview and said that, I'm speaking, but you're not speaking. They would boo you off the stage. And McCarthy sort of ignored him during that Caitlin Collins interview. So when I got him on air just on Thursday morning that I made sure that was my first question to him
Yeah.
because that moment just went absolutely viral. He called him unhinged. He said that he might be on something. He said he should get some help. And then he said that he wants to see justice for the underage girls. So, like, I mean, which is, pretty
Yep.
startling thing to say to someone, especially someone who had just the night before spoke at the Republican convention. I mean, Gates had spoken and sat next to Trump in the box too. So that also shows you kind of where the Republican Party is right now. McCarthy wasn't speaking there. He's still allied with Donald Trump, but he wasn't speaking there. Matt Gaetz was speaking at the Republican convention. So it is a bitter anger and hatred between the two that is going to absolutely continue to play out. And McCarthy makes no bones about it. He wants Gates. He wants Gates not only to lose, but he wants Gates in jail. So we'll see. We'll see if any of those actually play out.
Now, I hate to ask you a crass question, but I feel like I have to. You mentioned Matt Gaetz's speech. Botox, a lot of people on social media were talking about his face. Do you have any idea? I mean, it looked like he got his eyebrows done. There was some sort of, it looked like work done. I'm not an expert, but something was up.
There's, I have no inside knowledge
Okay.
about what was going on with Matt Gaetz.
You didn't
But I
report that
saw
out,
all
Manu?
the commentary.
Yeah.
I saw all the commentary online, and it looked something was a little off. I don't know, but maybe it was, maybe he'll address it when they get back to session next week.
Yeah. You're back in DC now. I want to talk about the steady drumbeat of pressure on Biden to drop out of the race.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been behind the scenes maneuvering, it seems, for a couple weeks now. I thought that the Trump assassination attempt would really put all of that on pause. But apparently Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer spoke to Biden over the weekend. Now you have Adam Schiff, a member of Congress, top Democrat, John Tester, Senator, Democrat, coming out and saying that Biden should drop out. Saying this, I had James Carville on this show last week, and I was saying this to him. I wake up every day thinking a different thing about whether Biden's going to drop out. By the afternoon, I've changed my mind because you see all this reporting about how there's this enormous amount of pressure. There's no way he's going to stay in the race. Even aides close to him think he's going to drop out. And then he comes out and someone from his campaign makes a statement that he would never drop out, that he'd have to be struck by lightning to ever consider dropping out of this race. Where does this all stand from your reporting? What is happening behind the scenes? What is going on?
I can tell you from talking to so many Democrats over the last couple weeks, and especially the last couple of days, there is just widespread panic right now. They don't really know what Joe Biden is going to do, but there is so much fear that they are going to lose, and not just lose the White House, but lose Congress and get wiped out because they are in total disarray. The polls are going in the wrong direction. Joe Biden has not alleviated any concerns post debate. He is not giving enough time for a new candidate to form, to come together, or any sort of process. So even if he were to step aside, like that process of replacing him is going to be incredibly messy. To get behind somebody, get them that person, nominated at the convention, and build a campaign apparatus, get their messaging and ad campaign, and get to the place where Biden has been, which has been building a campaign machine for the past several months, more than a year. But the other side is he stays in. How are things going to get better? They're losing donations. So they're losing support. Swing states are getting worse. And there is a feeling among a wide majority of voters that he's not up for the job. So if they have a debate with Trump in the fall, is it going to get any better for him? So that is all what's causing so much fear within the Democratic Party, because they kind of are stuck. So it's unclear what Joe Biden is ultimately going to do. All the messages coming, as you mentioned, from his people around him, his campaign team, he's in it, he's in it, he's in it. I can tell you, though, in covering politicians who drop out of races or resign or whatever, they're always running until they're not. So it's, so that's, if they give the second they give any sort of indication that he's not, then all of a sudden that creates a whole different news cycle and problem for them. So that's one thing to keep in mind in all of this. But it's all up to Joe Biden. So it's not clear what he's going to do, because even after Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi both reiterated their concerns and relayed concerns within the Democratic caucus about him continuing on as the candidate, he still went to Nevada this past week and went and stumped and told reporters, I'm running. He told people I'm running. So, like, he didn't really listen to the Democratic leaders. So what is going to change now? Who knows? I mean, maybe something's changed. Maybe Joe Biden's views have changed. Maybe his family. So, all that is still up in the air. But, every day that goes on makes it more likely that Joe Biden is the nominee.
Manu Raju, thanks so much for coming on Press Club. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is great.